motion to approve the minutes of April 16, 2025.
Motion.
Second, Brian, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so moved. Consulting agreements, did everybody get a chance to look at, Paul, you want to go through the consulting agreements?
Yeah, sure. There's two. Let me do I guess the more complicated one first. So the first one, I'm not sure if it's first in your pile, but EM Structural. They are currently serving as a structural engineer for MVG for the new building. And, the DASNY grant that these agreements are tied to as far as funding has ground improvement underneath that new building. So there's going to be grouted columns that you do these auger columns and you grout them, and that tightens up the ground and makes it strong enough to support the building pad. We felt that because the ground improvement is so tied to the building, the footprint, the loading, alignment of columns, et cetera, we really couldn't have a second different structural engineer involved in speccing the ground improvement and then doing the building with MBG. We felt as far as performance efficiency and the insight they need and information you need, they have to have the same structural engineer. So EM Structural, that proposal's for $30,000 to do the plans and specs and contracting. There'll be two separate contracts. This ground improvement contract would be one of them. They would do the contracting, and then they would do construction administration, reviewing the submittals in the bids and et cetera, and request for information, et cetera. They would take care of all that related to the ground improvement. So that's the first one. They would contract directly with Utica Harbor Point Development Corporation, professional services, and undertake that work, that design work relative to the ground improvement. And Bob looked at the procurement requirements for Utica Harbor Point Development Corporation, and wrote the resolution around complying with the procurement rules.
Anybody got any questions, Bob?
No, I'll keep my mouth shut. So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so
Aye.
moved.
Okay, and then the second contract, normally we do this with EDR, with Lisa in the prime, but this DASNY agreement really didn't include any planning or landscape architecture, any of those components. It was all engineering. So Lisa suggested to keep this more efficient, that Utica Harbor Point Development Corporation just contract directly with Ramble to do the other engineering services. And the other engineering services include utility extensions to the new development, at where MVG's new building would be. That's water, sewer, gas, electric, the design required to make those extensions. And then we're also doing and with the dollars we have left over from that, we're doing, and the ground improvement, we'll be doing some level of interior demolition or interior gutting of the 33 building with the dollars we have available, construction dollars. So this includes, again, the design and specification of those components. We also have in there full construction oversight. So we'll have a construction inspector oversee the whole project, both contracts, both the ground improvement and the utility work, and the demolition. Will have a full-time construction inspector out there to make sure that all the work is done in accordance with plans and specs. So that's what this contract is in front of you for Ramble.
And what's the projected cost of this undertaking?
I think that one came to, it was like 189, 186? I can't remember. Yeah. That includes
The going this fall for the next project too. by having this in on Rob's project, to tie us to 17 building also? To have the same oversight, or is this just for that site?
Well, right now we got we don't have a grant or anything addressing any work at the 17 building.
Right.
Yeah, so all the work is in and around the 33 building and the adjacent parcel. So
I understand that, but if somebody we select somebody for the 17, are we gonna be tied to the same type of project with anybody to do that also, or are we setting ourselves up to have to add a cost to the next project or not?
I guess I'm not, Vin, I'm not quite sure I understand. So if we have a,
We're gonna have to do it for whoever buys 17.
yeah, I mean, so if 17 building is bought, if there's an agreement, to go forward for the development of 17 building, I'm not sure if there'll be, I mean, I don't know if we'll have any state monies to do any pre-work. So this is kind of like we're, doing some pre-development activities which actually lowers the developer costs and gets them moving, because we have soft soils, we have contamination cleanup issues inside 33. So we're spending some state dollars to take the first step. 17, I don't know. Maybe we get some state dollars to do some work at 17, ahead of a developer, and then we would do the same thing. I mean, that work would be done under Utica Harbor Point development contract with state monies, and to do some pre-work before the developer comes in. But maybe 17 we'll skip that step. Maybe the developer will come in and take it from there. I'm not quite sure.
So Paul, in other words, what you're really saying is that if we're setting a precedent, we're setting a precedent with grant funding, not the other way around, right? So again, because we're using grant funding for this 189.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that's
right.
what I was trying to get at. We set a precedent we can't walk back, right?
we're doing it because we have grant funding, right? So when it comes to the 17 building, if we don't have grant funding, I think that's a rational explanation for the developer, but hopefully we will have more funding to work with.
We'll try for some monies for 17 building, and what we would, some of the things we've tried before with flood resiliency grant funding was to extend the utilities to, there's a few utilities that could be extended and to 17 building. There's no gas. The electric conduits are there, but we have to pull electrical. The water conduit's there, but we don't have, water connection. So we would probably do some utility work. We looked at maybe doing an ADA entrance, and back deck to 17, and kind of in compliance with flood regulations as well. So we thought about getting state grant to do those elements. We tried, we haven't got, we didn't get it, but we can try again. So anything we can do, if state wants to come in and help 17, we would do the same thing. We would.
Well, I think, we have to be a little bit proactive. I mean, Vin's point is well taken. The person who's expressed interest has suggested that there's been some preferential treatment.
Right.
Okay, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. So I think our posture is that we would be willing on a proactive basis to seek the same type of assistance relative to 1917.
Yeah.
And if in fact it's awarded, then it would be utilized in a comparable fashion, but it's grant related, not Harbor Point related in terms of the monies that are going to be utilized.
Am I wrong in seeing that person on the 33 building went out, is getting the funding and grants on their own?
These are different grants, though.
Huh?
This is a different grant, though.
And then my other question is, when we talked about other people that are interested now, they only can be interested in the 17 building, not the 33 building, correct? The 33 building is sold, bought, or whatever. Am I correct on that or no?
No, we don't have any agreement as of yet.
I mean, that really raises a good point.
Can we put that?
Are we putting the cart before the horse with regards to?
I want to get into that on 6.
Okay.
Session, so we can,
Thank you, appreciate that.
okay. Same thing. Hey, Bob Murray, do we have the proper wording in this resolution to cover us on that issue of quote unquote preferential treatment, so tied to the grant, or should we modify the agreement to cover ourselves?
So, and, which grant are we, can you guys hear me first of all?
Yeah,
Wait, are we talking about the E&M grant or the,
Well, the DASNY, this is the DASNY monies that relate both to the E&M agreement and the Rambo agreement. There's the DASNY funds, yeah.
yeah, I just want to make sure we're covered, so this doesn't bite us somewhere down.
Well, yeah, well, I don't know, Bob, I don't know how you want to answer that, but I'm just gonna say that the grant, the DASNY grant came, it was very specific to the scope of that area there. And of course, yeah, MVG lobbied on behalf of Utica Harbor Point Development Corporation for those monies as well. But you know, that was very specific. The scope was very specific, but we would never, again, we're going to go after monies for a 17 building on the state dollars. So I don't, from that point, I don't see that there's a preferential treatment, you know, I don't know, but Bob, I don't know if you want to.
yeah, well, no, I don't think there's, I mean, there was a request for expression of interest. This corporation selected MVG. We have a resolution authorizing the corporation to enter into a letter of intent. And we've been going back and forth on the a letter of intent and fits and starts for a couple years now. And we seem to have gotten really close now that the developer secured these DASNY dollars. They were referenced in the most recent iteration of the letter of intent that still is not finalized. And while we've all been now focusing on securing these DASNY grant dollars in the work, I mean, you know, just the odd thing is everything's been pinned on MVG, and we're all hopeful that MVG is successful. But to Brian's point, you know, we don't have a contract with that MVG. So I guess, I mean, this is a weird question, but I mean, suppose we started doing this work and then the MVG contract fell apart. Would we, what would we be in? Would we be in just as good as the position, or would it be unusual because we spent grant dollars for infrastructure for someone else's project, and the next developer, if there ever was, may not like that, would want to change it? I also know that I mean, this is part of the LOI is MVG was trying to figure out and you know, how to prime the pump on some of you're right. This is a grant that gets reimbursed after expenditures are made. So we were trying to figure out ways to creatively use funds to prime the pump and spend those dollars, and those receipts could then be used to get the grant reimbursed. So so I guess I said a lot there, but is that just as a practical matter, is Paul, is if the MVG situation never got consummated, would we start this work before a letter of intent is executed with MVG?
so,
Well, the only work we're doing is design at this point. But no, I would you know, I would say that you would absolutely not start construction until the letter of intent was,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
and that letter of
I
intent.
would think, gentlemen, that we should amend the motion to suggest that this agreement resolution is subject to a letter of intent being executed with MVG.
I think that makes,
that's fair.
I mean, I think that as a practical matter, I think that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Is that, can you add that whereas clause to the, how would you do that, Bob?
Well, we leave it to Bob to figure it out, but
Yeah,
I'd
Yeah.
like to make a motion to amend the resolution to reflect that this resolution is contingent upon the execution of a letter of intent between the corporation and the MVG.
I think before we do that, you should talk to them and tell them what our plan is and give them a chance to come up with something before we amend it. I think we should do that before we just amend it. Well, they've been our partner, not our partner, but they've been part of this from the beginning. We gave that to them in 22. And before we just do something right now, I think we should call them and say,
Well-
this is what we're gonna do, and at the next meeting.
But all you're doing, yeah, but all you're doing is just, you're not giving them any. All this is just to make sure that we're not expending funds ahead of the letter of intent. So it doesn't.
I think, listen, I don't think it does anything to derail the situation.
No.
I think all we're saying is we don't want to put the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
So, and they know that they can't do anything until they have a executed letter.
Why wouldn't you just tell them and then our next meeting do it? Now you gave them a warning and you did it, and then we're gonna do it. That's all.
But by putting it in the resolution, they know it's approved, and they know that all they gotta do is execute the letter of intent, and we can move forward. They don't have to wait till the
We're
next meeting.
approving it here.
They don't have to wait till the
Absolutely.
next meeting if they sign the letter
We're
of
gonna
intent.
approve it, we're just saying it's subject to them giving us a letter.
I don't think that they would have any aversions to this. This is not backtracking on what we promised.
No.
If
No,
it
no,
was, I wouldn't go there.
I
we-
think they'd understand our position.
It's only reasonable.
They were totally reasonable. They would absolutely understand. Yeah.
We're
There-
committing dollars.
Forgive
There's
me,
a-
I wasn't around in 2022, but this whereas, where it says whereas on August 31st, 2022, by resolution, the corporation approved the MVG project and the sale of the MVG parcel to MVG. That by itself isn't a form of intent?
Well, it's an intention of the parties.
There's no
but there's
instrument
no-
that reflects intent, though. I mean, this is just a whereas clause. A whereas clause has no legal significance. And so they have to sign a letter, and so do we have to sign a letter of intent.
Yeah,
I mean, right
that's
now,
right.
technically, and this is not my intent, but just legally speaking, if somebody came and blew our socks off with a potential offer, we have the right to accept that offer. We have no legally binding agreement with MVG as we sit here today. I'm not looking to circumvent MVG, but legally speaking, gotta have a letter of intent. So like you agree verbally to buy a house, but there's no contract, that verbal understanding is meaningless.
Agreed. And do you, if you look at section 3 of the resolution, does that, I mean, we can certainly be more specific, but section 3 is purposely drafted in a way where I think we could accomplish what the board's trying to accomplish here. It says the corporation, in consultation with its general counsel, is hereby authorized to negotiate, execute, and deliver a professional services agreement with EM relative to the project services to be performed in the manner described, along with appropriate changes or scope additions as approved by the president. So we have not, right, this is just the authority to negotiate and execute an agreement. We could, we haven't reviewed the agreement yet, but we could certainly put that concept into the agreement.
Yeah, I think that whereas that section 3 is obviously between us and EM, it has nothing to do with GMV. Or MVG, I should say. I really think we should just have a short, sweet clause that says contingent upon execution of a letter of intent between the corporation and MVG. Simple as that.
How come, let me ask you this question, how come we never asked for a letter of intent before?
We have.
Yeah.
We have. We've been trying to
So
negotiate.
we've been asking
Oh, yeah.
that right along.
Absolutely.
What do they say?
They're working on it.
They've been working with their attorney.
Yes.
George Murad has been working with our counsel to come up with a final version. So that we're not catching them off guard, Joe. This has been in the
You don't
works.
think there's gonna be pushback on
No.
that?
No, absolutely not.
No, it's just gonna push
Matter of
things
fact, you know what
quicker
I
to the
think?
end.
I think it's gonna expedite the process.
Yeah. I do too. And we're committing to it. We're saying, hey, we're gonna do it.
That's right. And we don't have to wait for a next meeting.
Yeah.
If they sign a letter, we give them authorization to sign a letter of intent on our behalf, we don't have to wait till the next meeting for this work to start.
So we have this money to start, we just wait until
Their agreement. Yeah, what if they just say, I don't wanna do it anymore, what if, we've committed to 2 contracts that may not have anything to do with the project of the guy who comes in and blows our socks off, so.
Just one question, Paul. Is the ESD grant that was received, or the DASNY grant, whatever the grant was that was received for this work, is this work geared specifically to the plans being proposed by MVG? Or is this generalized scope of work that will assist us with regards to the marketability of that building, regardless of who the prospective purchaser is?
Yeah, the text that went along to DASNY with regard to scope of the grant was it generically referred to developer. It didn't specifically refer to MVG. It refers to pad-ready development, utility extensions, ground improvements in the area of this new development and this, adjacent to the 33 building, and it addresses, in some level of interior demolition in 33. But there's no tie-in with MVG. It's developer is mentioned in the scope generically.
So if MVG goes away, this grant could be applied to any other prospective.
As far as I read it, yeah. I mean, I know they help lobby for it and everything else, but it doesn't tie to them. It ties to the Utica Harbor Point Development Corporation solely.
Assuming that developer wants to build an addition on the vacant lot next to the 1933 building.
Yeah, I mean, right. It's specific to that area.
I mean, if a developer comes in and only wants to
So the grant is
work
not,
within the confines of the 1933 building as it currently exists,
got two
a lot of
parcels.
this grant isn't necessary.
You got two parcels, 1933 vacant lot.
Correct.
So the DASNY grant applies to the vacant lot and not necessarily the 1933, or is it applied?
Well, it's written. It's both. It on the vacant lot, it includes utility extensions and ground improvements on the vacant lot, and 33 includes the interior cleanup, and interior gutting. So the scope references both.
Bulk of the money is going towards the vacant lot.
The bulk of the money, exactly. Yes, correct. Yep.
So as I
What
look
would
at,
they be doing to the vacant lot?
Improving it for an addition.
So what? So how would you?
Soil remediation,
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
right, a lot of it's.
Well, Paul talked about it. They're putting structures in the ground that will help support the pad for a future, or foundation for future addition. I'm guessing that's where the bulk of it is going.
Yeah, the ground is super soft. It without the ground improvement techniques, you could not build, directly on that ground without, deep foundations, et cetera. So, yeah.
so this might sound like a stupid question, but known to ask stupid questions. Do we want to specify this to Mohawk Valley Gardens, or should it be more generic than that?
That's what I'm saying.
If they do walk away or something happens and we don't do it, are we gonna have to come back and say, okay, it's not Mohawk Valley Gardens anymore, it's, Brian Thomas's company is gonna do it, now we gotta change all the wording? Or could this be more generic, that it's any developer?
Well, the language with DASNY, the scope that DASNY has is generic for any developer, really. I guess the tie-in to MVG is through the letter of intent,
So
So
in the clause, you just take out MVG and just say an acceptable letter of intent. From a prospective developer, that way you're not taking sides, right? You're just, the grant is specific to the land, not necessarily to the scope and the developer.
Shouldn't you be taking sides
Makes
with it though? So
Well,
you're watering down the-
We're not looking, we're just saying in terms of how it's worded, we're not going to end the negotiations with MVG. We're just saying we shouldn't show preferential treatment in a resolution when the grant is to the corporation and not to the developer.
Well, and I think by keeping it general and keeping them out, theoretically, you're implying that you're gonna hold any developer to the same standard.
Exactly.
Letter.
That's a good point. Good point.
Would it make,
Sure if these are gonna be needed for
The next
the
developer.
next development.
Mhm.
No, that's good.
But it's available, so if the next developer comes in, I've already approved this,
Does
Obviously,
MVG
we all-
know that this grant is here and they're gonna start this work? Do they know about this already?
Oh,
MVG.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
Rob
they-
was here 2 meetings ago
they lobbied
talking
this-
to us
Right.
about it.
But I didn't
They
know
lobbied
the
this-
grant was approved then. by
Yeah,
that.
it was approved and he was working with
They
EST to
lobbied the
get
state
the,
for it.
was it disbursement grant,
Right,
authorization?
grant disbursement agreement.
Text
Yeah.
message.
Where do we stand on that agreement? Is a draft been submitted to anybody for consideration?
The- all the paperwork went back to DASNY, and we're waiting for the final agreement to come back for signature.
We're not changing anything here except making it more generic.
So
And
I,
we still
Right,
hope
We're
that
making
it's
it
gonna be
generic
done.
when you just got done saying they lobbied for the grant. They're a big part of it. They've been part of us for 22. And I know it's nothing, it's technicality. In my mind, I would just like them face-to-face talk. This is what we're doing before we just do it. I got no problem with what you guys are saying, but we're talking out of both sides of our mouth, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
One minute we're saying they lobbied for the
I
grant.
don't think so.
Now we're gonna put it generic. I mean, you guys are a lot smarter than I am. I'm just sitting here on the outside looking in. They've been
Would it-
here since 22 with us when nobody else was involved. Right, they haven't done, kind of like with Patel and them forever, they didn't close and they kept pushing it back to us. They're kind of doing the same thing. All I'm saying, I'd like to have us, I'd like somebody to talk to them, tell them what we're doing and why we're doing it before we just do it in a meeting.
so would it be prudent now to ask to go into executive session for purposes of negotiation so we can get an update as it relates to where we stand on that letter of intent? Without asking those kind of questions in open session. I'd make that motion.
Well, wait, before we do it, just, Bob, I mean, you made a motion on the one resolution, are we taking it back before we do that? Because there was a motion for the first one with EM structural, so if we're updating it, do we need to,
Yes.
so we're gonna, okay.
So I'll make the motion to amend or to withdraw the previous motion that I made.
Second.
We gotta go back
Right,
to
Bob, you'll tell me how to word this,
I gotta
notes.
remove the existing passage of that motion.
Right.
So since I made the motion, I move to
There's a
rescind.
motion to amend that too, wasn't there?
But I think we gotta rescind before we make a
We gotta
motion.
rescind the first one, right?
I make a motion to rescind.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So moved.
And I'll make a motion to amend the proposed resolution to add an additional provision that says that this resolution is subject to the execution of a letter of intent with a third-party developer.
Why don't we do the executive session first,
Yeah,
and then
we
we'll
can
go
still
back.
motion to go into executive session.
Okay.
Make a motion?
We'll make the motion. You started to make one
Make a
motion.
motion to go into executive session for purposes of negotiation.
Okay.
We're going into executive session to discuss the disposition of real property.
Correct.
Yeah.
Opposed?
So could somebody tell us
2 seconds to resign. Okay.
Anything else? Oh,
So I'll make a motion to,
Table.
table the two, resolutions in front of us.
second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Uh,
Opposed? So moved. Anything that's important on these other things, or is it just the same old, same old?
Same old.
Same old? Okay,
Right, I think Jones is sort of waiting for ESD
yep,
reimbursement. Jack didn't have an update today,
okay.
ESD's working on it.
and
Bob, so you and I, you're gonna give me a time or a date that we could talk to, Rob Ash and his attorney?
Yes, will do.
Okay,
And if
All
you
right.
need me, I'm open Friday afternoon and back in town next week.
okay.
motion to adjourn.
I'm back in town Friday too. Yeah.
I made the motion.
Oh, you made it, I'll second it.
I can't make it.
You have to make it.
You're right.
Adjourn.
Unless it's
Second. Everybody, second.
it.
All in favor, all opposed? Thanks, everybody. Sorry it took so long, but
What's- Right.
good meeting.
Yeah. it
Thank
was a
you.
good meeting.